if you need to do some programmatic navigation client side in Next.js, how can you do that? Well, we're going to cover that. And then we're also going to cover a mistake that people make when it comes to kind of linking between pages, but we'll cover that here towards the end. So basically, programmatic navigation client side, you're going to need to use the useRouter hook, importing that from Next navigation. Now, this is going to have to be done in client components. Anytime you use a hook, it's going to have to be a client component. And as you can see at the top of this nav button file, we have a use client directive making this client side code. Now the useRouter hook, after you call it, it is going to return a object. We're just naming it router here. That's probably the convention that you're going to see, but it's just an object that's going to have several different methods on this object. One of them is .push. You're also going to have several other methods like replace, refresh, prefetch, back, forward. It's going to be very similar. If you have used other kind of routing hooks in other navigation libraries like React Router DOM or similar libraries to it, it's going to have basically all those features as well. I'm not going to cover everything here. We're basically just going to cover router.push because everything else is, fairly straightforward, like router.refresh, router.replace, but just be aware that there is all these other methods if you're looking for something a little bit more specific than just kind of client-side navigation. But to perform client-side navigation, basically what you're going to do is to router.push, you're going to pass some sort of path that is a string as the first argument, and then you could pass an object as a second argument with a property of scroll and setting that to a Boolean or a true false value. And to cover scroll just real quickly here, by default, Next.js will scroll to the top of a page when navigating to a new route. You can disable this by setting scroll to false. If you call router.push, you pass in a string or a path as the first argument. As a second argument, you can pass an object with a scroll property and you can set that to false, and that's going to prevent Next.js from scrolling to the top of the page. So in this case, it would prevent Next.js from scrolling to the top of the dashboard page when that router.push is called, because by default, it will scroll to the top of the page of that new route. So to show you examples of just using the push method here, we have this nav button, which, like I said, is a client component here. And there was some intentionality here with how I set this up. To where, let's say in our homepage here, instead of using this nav button component, let's say we wanted to just use the useRouter hook directly. Well, to do that, we would have to call the useRouter hook, which means that we would have to make this entire homepage a client component, which in our case is not going to matter for performance. Like, this is just a demo page after all, so it's not really important. But you could very well be doing like a bunch of data fetching here at the top of this component, or there could be a lot else going on to where you really don't want to make this a client-side component. And generally in Next.js, it's probably good practice to kind of scope your client-side code to be kind of as minimal as possible. So instead of making this all client-side, we're just going to make a client component that is this nav button, and then we're going to kind of slot that in to our server component here. So for a nav button, it expects a title and a path. The title is just going to be the title of the button, and then the path is going to be whatever we pass into router.push. So in our case, the title is settings and the path is /settings. So if I click on my nav button here that says settings, it takes me to /settings. And then in my settings page, if I wanted to add a link back to maybe my dashboard, I would just add my nav button here with a title of dashboard and a path that is /dashboard. And then on my settings page, you see it now links to my dashboard. So pretty straightforward here to perform client-side navigation. You just use a useRouter hook from Next navigation, returns an object in which you can call the .push method and a string that is a path. And just know that you do have other methods that you can do, and you can disable scrolling by passing scroll as false as an object as your second argument. And then you also have replace, refresh, prefetch, back and forward if you need it. Now, to just touch on a mistake that can occur if you're maybe new to Next.js, and that is in our examples here, generally speaking, for our homepage, we wouldn't want to use a client-side button to just perform this sort of linking to a different page, because that's really all we're doing here is providing a link to a different page. We really don't need to do that with client-side navigation. And instead, what we can do is we can use the link component, importing that from next link, and then I can say settings. This can be the name of this link, and then we can pass an href that is /settings. And now if we go to our homepage, we still have this settings link. We could of course change the styling if we wanted to, and that's going to link us to the settings page. But that prevents us from needing to use any sort of client-side code here. We just use the link component from next link, which is definitely the recommended way to just add these links between your pages, much like I do here in my layout.js. I just add these different link components between pages, and that is what you see kind of towards the top of this page here. But there are probably going to be cases in your application to where you might need to do some sort of programmatic client-side navigation, and that's where you're going to use the useRouter hook. So just wanted to make sure that you don't go for this hook for everything. It would be a mistake to do it when you're just linking between pages and you want to use the link component from next link rather than using client-side navigation for that. So hopefully this video helps and kind of clears up client-side navigation and some different things you can do with it. And I'll see you in that next one.